أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم اللهم افتح لنا باب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Sayyidina Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The orphans have a very special place when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt. Some of the final words of Imam Ali alayhi salam was about the Aitam, never to forget the orphans. And the Ahlul Bayt were known never to return an orphan whenever an orphan would knock on their door. There was always a very special place for the one who would care for the orphan. And Rasulullah himself, he was an orphan. And he would say there would be a special place for the one in heaven who would take care of an orphan. Whenever my teacher speaks to me when I'm overseas, he always asks the question, Kif al-Aitam? He says, how are the orphans? And he's referring to all of you. He's referring to us. He refers to us as orphans. We are Aitam. Because he says, you are Aitam Ali Muhammad. That, Sallallahu Alaihi Muhammad. That there's the understanding of an orphan being the one who doesn't have his mother and his father. But that us as the Aitam of Al-Muhammad, that Al-Muhammad are truly our parents, and we are in a time of ghaibah where our Imam is not present before us, that as orphans, sometimes we don't know where to go. There's a lot of chaos around us, and we need our mother and our father. And whenever we knock on the door of our mother and our father, Al-Muhammad, they always open the door for us. This is how we have to view our relationship to them. And that's why when it comes to especially the mother, when we say mother, everyone knows that the mother has a very special place in the life of a son or daughter. Nothing can replace a mother. And in Arabic, has a few definitions, one of them being asl, meaning the origin of a thing. Aslu shay', the origin, the source is your mother. So when you look at how they refer to in some of the ancient books, they refer to Makke as Ummul Qura, as in it is the mother of the earth. It's the origin of the earth. So Ummul Qura, mother, meaning the source or origin of a thing. Or sometimes can be a collection or a gathering of something, as in Jama'. So we look at Al-Fatiha in the Quran, and it's referred to as Ummul Kitab. It is the mother of the book. Why? Because it gathers and collects everything that's supposed to be in the book, Tawheed and Nubuwah and Ma'ad and everything in one surah. So they call it Ummul Kitab, Al-Fatiha. These are the different definitions of the word and mother. So when you come to look at the name that was given to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam, what's the name that was given to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam? Abiha, the mother of her father. When you look at that name that was given to her, the mother of her father, and you see the different definitions of the word meaning the origin and source of a thing. How does that apply to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam? Because without Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam as the centerpiece of the whole message, the message cannot continue. Because Husainun minni wa ana min Hussain, and there is no Hussain without Zahra, that the message relies on Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam to carry. They say that she is the one, they call it, she carried al-thiql al-akbar, She carried a very heavy responsibility in that she had to carry Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam because of what he was destined for. That the Prophet's entire mission and message was hand in hand with that of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, and in the middle of them, the link in between them, the rope that binds them, is Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam Abiha. Or as the one who, if you want, in a summary of what the Prophet is, the one who represents what the Prophet is, the one who symbolizes what the Prophet is Abiha. The same way that the Fatiha represents the Quran as Kitab. Abiha represents and symbolizes Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you want to know Rasulullah, you have to know Zahra alayhi salam. Abiha, she was the one who took in her father from a very young age. After Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam passed away in the gorge of Abu Talib, Sayyidah Zahra was still a child at the time, and Sayyidah Khadija tells her, I leave your father to you, because I know that you are the one with that heart that's going to be able to take care of him for the rest of his mission. And she did. And so on these nights, we dedicate them to our mother, Lady Zahra alayhi salam, and specifically to the topic of Imam Al-Mahdi, because he will be the one who will avenge the injustice that was committed to her son, and he will be the one who will finally come back to the orphans of this world and to fill it with justice the way that it was filled with injustice. We see around us today, the world is changing at an unprecedented rate. It's chaos, and we don't know where we're going in the next 10 years. We don't even know if we're going to be welcome in this country. We don't know what's going on, even if we're born here. We don't know what's happening. We don't know if we represent British values. I can tell you this. In the few days that I've been here, and I was born here, and I lived my whole life until I was 21 years old in London. And I moved to Lebanon 11 years ago, and I've been there since. I can tell you this, in the last couple of days since I've been here, something became very apparent to me. Going from a place where I was right in the middle of pretty much the war zone in South Lebanon, was where I live and where I stayed. I've stayed there for the last 2 months, so all the bombs and everything, and I could see everything, and every day my house would shake, and it was just a normal thing. I would study and the house would shake. And then everyone pretty much being on the same page, everyone in the village, and everyone in the other villages around us, and everyone understanding and feeling the presence of Imam Al-Mahdi as if he was exactly where you are right now. That's how everyone's interacting with the idea of the Messiah. Everyone's interacting with this idea like it's so real, and that he is so present, and that he is so close, and that the prophecy is coming true. Coming here, I look around me, and I felt like, wallah, I felt like I was in a zombie apocalypse over here. And it's strange, right? Because over there is where all the bombs are and everything else, and over here everything's supposedly very sophisticated and modern. But the way everyone moves around with their bank cards and, you know, numbers, and they think that they're very secure because they have those numbers, and all they think about is, you know, their bills and the mortgage and the car and everything else. And you go to work and you come home and you have 2 hours with your family, and you do this again and again and again. Something happens along the way where you get used to this mundane, comfortable but mundane, modern, very easy to live and sustain yourself type of lifestyle. When I say easy, I don't mean that you're living easy lives. Your jobs might be very difficult, but I mean in terms of, you know, where you're getting your meals from, You know how, like over there, they don't know where they're getting the meals from. You know, today it was said that in Gaza, not everyone's eating every day anymore. They don't eat every day anymore in the whole of Gaza. That some people have to skip a day. Most people have to skip a day. Most people skip a day of food. That's what I meant by easy. In terms of human civilization, right now, people in modern societies have it easy in terms of food, in terms of what they need to sustain their lives. What happens though, in terms of comfort, when you have too much comfort, the realities begin to escape you and you begin to live within a veil. Sometimes too much comfort is not a good thing. Struggle, on the other hand, even though we like to move away from struggle, we don't like to always be in a struggling mode. At the same time, struggle brings you to a place where you have to seek help from a higher source, like God. And that's why civilizations of the past, before modernity, were more godly per se. After modernity, in the last few hundred years, after the technological revolution, the world became a lot less godly. And the more it advances technologically, the less godly it becomes. Because it has its own God, it becomes a God itself. This is something that, as followers of Rasulullah, as followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam, we have to be so careful of in a time like this, especially because something very important might be happening that was prophesied in our religion, but we have become so desensitized to it, and we've become so used to going to a majlis here and there, and that summarizes what it means to be religious for me, that I miss the mark. I miss the point. And that's what's scary, because when we read about the end of times, when we read about Al-Sufyani and Al-Dajjal and the Antichrist and all these different things, and we think everything's going to be so obvious, well, it's really obvious, but no one cares. And if we're not careful, we won't care either. Actually, it's even more dangerous than that. If we're not careful, we'll be of the enemies. How so? It's like this ridiculous notion right now that as Shia, we have nothing to do with what's happening in Palestine because they're not Shia. That's so ridiculous. I can't even believe a Shia would say it. Or that we can't do anything about it because we're supposed to just wait for Imam Al-Mahdi to come back. And he's the one who's going to take care of everything. Or, etc., etc., etc. You guys know, you've already heard these ridiculous arguments. If we're not careful, we fall into that camp. That's less than human. If people can look at what's happening today and not have their humanity moved to do something about it, let alone their religiosity, then how can you even call yourself a follower of Prophet Muhammad who said that my ummah is like one body? When part of it is in pain, it's all in pain. Or the one who wakes up and does not think about the Muslims is not a Muslim. When I was there, the Latum sessions over there are very different than Latum sessions over here, with all due respect. Over there, every week, during the Latmiyya, especially in the last few nights of Fatimiyya, the reciters would say, for example, the last one that I was at, he'd say, look around you. The people that were here last week, they're not all here today. Some of them, we buried them. This is not like what we say in Shahr Ramadan, right? Last year, this year. We're talking about week to week. And people in a majlis just like this, you look around and you know that one of you is going to be a shaheed next week. And he says, what was the secret in his tear for Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam that he was chosen to be given an opportunity to be a martyr, and we're still here? And then they cry. You see how that's a completely different mindset than the one of comfort. Because when you're in the middle of the struggle, you feel it a lot more. And what I really want to say right now, my main message to summarize is, right now, you're not maybe acknowledging this, but you're in the middle of the struggle. Just because externally it seems that you're comfortable doesn't mean you're actually comfortable. You have to come back to your soul and realize you're just as much in the struggle as they are over there. And that's the realest solidarity that you can offer. The solidarity of your soul. Because then everything else is going to follow. When your soul stands in solidarity with the oppressed, everything else externally will follow. And you will see how it will follow. This is all very relevant to our discussion. Our discussion is going to be on Islamic eschatology. It's going to be on the return of Imam Al-Mahdi and the coming of the final hour. The main focus will be on his return. And likewise, in times of comfort, we don't usually feel his presence as if he's actually there. People begin to doubt. Or they take it as just a sign of creed, the usual creed that's there. But we have to interact with our Imam in a way that he is central to our deen. We have to interact with him like a real human being that I have a relationship with, because he is a real human being who is alive today on this earth, that I'm supposed to have a relationship with because I am of his Shia. That he is the link between the heavens and the earth. He is the rope that binds the heavens and the earth. And he is the portal for me to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's this man that is the descendant of the Prophet, that I'm supposed to believe in the way I believe in God. Do you have any doubt in Allah, in his existence? I hope not. Do you believe in Imam Al-Mahdi the same way you believe in Allah? It's just a question for you to ask yourself. Maybe it's easier for you to believe in Allah because you exist and you think to yourself, how did I get here? And I couldn't be here except that a Lord created me. So then I believe in him. Now, I'm asking you, do you believe in a man who is over 1,000 years old in the same way? Because our religion dictates that we're supposed to. So fair enough, there are levels to belief. If you don't, it's okay, don't panic, because there are levels to belief and you can increase that belief. There's levels to belief, like the highest level of yaqeen is when there's absolutely no doubt. That's not always what Allah wants from us. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wants from us a level of yaqeen that we act upon. Because not everyone can control what they believe in. However, we need to consider this element of our religion enough that I work on my belief. Because if I don't, I will not bear the fruit of what this religion has to offer. I won't bear the fruit of it. That if there was no Imam Al-Mahdi, this is so far in terms of my own considerations, my own contemplations, I don't find that the religion of Islam makes any sense if Imam Al-Mahdi is not alive right now. And I'll explain what I mean by that by the end of the lecture and the coming nights. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would all of this be and then we're just left alone and nothing happens? You see, the Shia have always been categorized by two main wings. The first wing was Ashura, the second wing was Mahdawiyya. The first wing is Ashura, as in these people, as much as you kill them, as much as you oppress them, as much as you come after them, as much as you come to eradicate them in all different countries, from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Iraq to Iran to everywhere else, they always come back in multiplied numbers even stronger than they were before. And that's the story of our people and our ancestors for the last 1,000 years. Because of these two main wings. The first wing being Ashura, that even if you kill them and take away everything from them, because they have a symbol like Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam, and because they believe in this notion of martyrdom, and they believe in the notion that the blood of the oppressed and the blood of the martyr reigns supreme over the sword, and that Aradita ya Rab, khudh hatta tarda. Have you been satisfied, Lord? Take until you're satisfied. Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Lord, accept from me this sacrifice. That the lessons of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, and the lessons of Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, and the lessons of Imam al-Hussain created in them fearlessness. So they're willing to give up even their lives for the stand that they believe in. And on the other hand, Mahdawiyya allows them to have undying hope. That there is ultimately never a consideration that they're ever going to lose. You see, that's the difference between us and a lot of the people around us that we share sentiments with in terms of what's happening in Palestine right now or elsewhere around the world. There's oppression. They don't know what to do. They're so hurt and lost because they don't see an end to this. They say, how could this be? In fact, sometimes they stop believing in God. Because they say, if there was a God, He wouldn't allow this. That's a completely different perspective than what we say. Because we say, ultimately, when we see that child screaming and crying, we know there will be justice and retribution for him. We know how the story ends. It's been prophesied to us. The only question for us is, are we going to be of those that were prophesied to be with the Imam or not? So for us, as Shia, the Imams come back for the whole world. But the Shia are supposed to be the ones that knew about him coming, so they're prepared for him coming, so they're going to be his army when he comes to serve him, and taking it very, very seriously. Like one of my friends, and he's in London, he already is creating applications and a whole database of information. He says this is all going to be for the Imam when he comes. He takes it very, very seriously. As in, the Imam is alive, he's there, he's coming, and I have to be ready. I'm an expert when it comes to this sort of technology. Let me prepare it. He believes in it the same way that you believe you're seeing me in front of you right now. He believes in it. So these are the two wings of Ashura and of Mahdawiyya. And that's why Marja'iyya is so important. Because Marja'iyya represents Mahdawiyya today. Marja'iyya is that which for us allows a centralized power to protect the word of Islam and Tashayyu' today. That's why it freaks people out when someone like Sayyid Sistani, may Allah prolong his life, an old man in the middle of Najaf, he's not politically elected. He doesn't have a position in the government. He's a marja'. But when he writes a fatwa in which every able-bodied man must go and fight against ISIS, everyone does. That power for the politics of the modern world is unprecedented. It doesn't make sense to them. To us, it makes complete sense. But no one else has that. You see, only we have that. We are very, very powerful. And that's why some people find us very, very dangerous. What's upon us right now is to formulate a correct political worldview, a correct religious worldview, so that we know what's happening in the world today, so we're on the same page with the rest of the Shia in the world. So we know what's happening in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in all these different places, because it's all relevant to us today. But people begin to doubt still. Some people, they grow old in age, they feel like it's been too long. Middle-aged men and women, they say when you're young, you believe in these things. You believe in the Imam. But as you grow older, you come to see it as a story. Or some say that the Shia, when it came to the 11th Imam, they became lost. They didn't know what to do. They made up the story that an Imam was born and he went into ghaiba, and this was the excuse they used, and blah, blah, blah. Some say that, like when you look in Encyclopedia Britannica, they create an ambience of doubt in that the concept of the Mahdi is not in the Quran. That's what it would begin with straight away, as if everything was in the Quran, as if to pray 5 times was in the Quran, which is not. But they'll begin with that just to create that ambience of doubt. And if you're young and you're researching on Google about Imam al-Mahdi and you come across these different sources, you start to feel like there are so many questions that don't have answers. There are a lot of doubts, but my parents believe in this. My brothers and sisters, the community believes in this, so I'm supposed to believe in this. Our deen was always a deen of questioning, and every single question that you have in your mind about Imam Mahdi has already been asked in the last 1,000 years and has already been answered. Okay? And on Sunday evening, we're going to have a Q&A. So you guys write down whatever questions you have as I'm speaking, and on Sunday we're going to talk about everything, and there's no limits. Ask whatever you want to ask. When it comes to all of these doubts, we have to be able to answer these doubts. So I wanted to offer a few proofs on the existence of the Imam from the Quran and the Sunnah for us to consider, for it to increase our belief in the Imam as we go into the prophecy of the end of times in the coming nights. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first proof that we begin with is from the Quran itself. And someone would say, is the Imam even in the Quran? Is his name in the Quran? Of course, his name is not in the Quran, just like the name of Imam Ali alayhi salam, one of the most obvious personalities in Islamic history for both Shia and Sunni, is not in the Quran as Ali ibn Abi Talib. But is he referred to? Yes. And we can see that in the Quran, Imam Mahdi is referred to, and the Shia interpretation of the ayah, Baqiyatullah khayrun lakum, may not be accepted by all denominations of Islam. But there is an ayah in the Quran that one must ponder over that refers to the Imam. And if it doesn't refer to the Imam, one must pose the alternative, which there isn't one. And I'm going to ask you guys to pose the alternative for me, so you see that there isn't one. So Allah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. He says that He is the one who sent His messenger with guidance and the true religion, وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ, the true deen, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, in order for it to reign supreme over every other religion. Even if the polytheists hate this. Okay? So this is a divine promise in the Quran. Allah is saying He sent a messenger with guidance and the pure true religion, and this religion is going to reign supreme over every other religion. So everyone is going to follow the truth. The Quran says this, and the Quran is the word of Allah, no? So it has to be true, right? If it's not true, that's a problem. Is it true yet? Is it true? Does everyone follow the truth on earth right now? Is everyone Muslim? No, not everyone's Muslim. That means this prophecy has not yet been fulfilled. Now, we have to logically deduce, okay, how can this prophecy be fulfilled? How's that going to happen? Right now, without divine intervention, can you pose an alternative for this prophecy, this Quranic prophecy to be fulfilled without Imam al-Mahdi? Without the prophecy of Imam al-Mahdi. How will this happen? Who's going to do this? Saudi Arabia? No. Who's going to do it? The Muslim governments aren't going to do it. Turkey is not going to do it. Who's going to do it? How will the world follow Islam? This is a Quranic promise. This is just for you to sit down and think about it. Sit down and consider it. That's how we're supposed to interact with the verses and the narrations. You have to sit down and think. You can't just, it's not going to just be spoon-fed to you. So if someone says, is Imam Mahdi in the Quran? I say, there is a reference to him. In this ayah is a reference to him. If you say it's not, then fine. It's not. Tell me, what is it referring to? How? How will it happen? I'm asking you, how? There's a reference. طيب. Aside from the reference, you know when we have Quran, you have to have hadith. And hadith explains the Quran for us. When it comes to the hadith about the Imam, there are so many hadiths about the Imam, by the way, specific hadiths, in both Sunni and Shi'i sources. In the Sunni sources, they come up to about 270 hadiths in the famous Sunni sources. When it comes to the Shia sources, it's in the thousands, because it's a central figure. It's a central point to our tradition. طيب. A narration that's mentioned in both Shi'i and Sunni sources is the narration that most of you know, the narration that the Prophet Muhammad says, and this is one that's accepted, it's sahih, in chain. It's a strong chain on both the Sunni side and the Shi'i side, when the Prophet says, after me there will be 12 rulers, or after me there will be 12 emirs, or after me there'll be 12 khalifas. It's said in so many different ways. Who are those 12? Who are they? And you know what's interesting? That this narration is mentioned even in the Sunni books that were written in the times, compiled in the times of Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Hassan Al-Askari, not afterwards. Okay? So for anyone to say these hadith were written after the idea of the 12th Imam, or after that was made up. You know how some people say that it was a made up idea. These hadiths were there before the date of the birth of the Imam. It was in the time of his forefathers, not even in Shi'i books. The idea of 12 was there beforehand. The idea of 12 was prophesied beforehand. Putting that hadith aside, my favorite hadith proof is just in Hadith al-Thaqalain. And I think that's enough. It's so obvious. Hadith al-Thaqalain is undeniable, right? Everyone believes in this. Again, even when it comes to the sources within the books of our brothers, it's accepted that I'm leaving behind two weighty things. I'm leaving behind al-Thaqalain. Kitab Allah wa atrati ahli bayti. I'm leaving behind the book of Allah and my family, my progeny, the Ahlul Bayt. Whoever holds on to these two will never be misguided. The one who holds on to these two will never be misguided. And they will never separate. وَلَنْ يَتَفَرَّقَا حَتَّى يَرِدَا عَلَيَّ الْحَوْضِ. And they will never separate until they are returned to me at the pond. Speaking about at the end. Okay? So, what's the Prophet, what's he saying? He says, I'm about to leave you all. And when does he say this? He says this on the day of Ghadir. So after he said, Man kuntu mawla, fahada ali mawla, right? Then he says, I'm leaving behind two things. I'm going to leave you. I'm leaving. Your Prophet is leaving you. If you want to continue to have guidance, there are two things that you have to hold on to. The Book of Allah, the Quran, and my family. These two things will guide you. And these two things, they never separate. You can't take one without the other. They never separate. And if you hold on to them, you'll never be misguided. So, what does this mean? The chain is 100%. What does this mean? What does this hadith mean? First of all, we can see that the Prophet is saying that the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt are upon haqq. Okay? The Quran and Ahlul Bayt are upon truth. They're upon righteousness. He's saying that they will never leave each other. They will never separate from each other. Okay? طيب. Interestingly enough, we have the Quran. We all read it every day. Where is Al-Itra? In the world, it has to be here because he said it will never separate from the Quran. So where would it be? There has to be a human descendant from the family of the Prophet that cannot be wrong because he's upon haqq. So it's a ma'soom. This person must be held onto. The Prophet told us hold on to him and you won't go astray. So Ahlul Bayt, Quran, together always, one can't be without the other. They never separate until they meet me at the pond. Then we have the Quran. That means there has to be someone that's still here. Who else other than the Shia believes in an Imam that's still alive to now? It doesn't fit in with any other creed. If you ask a non-Imami, what does this hadith mean? They won't make sense of it. Because they'll tell you that we have the Quran, but where's the Itra? Because Imam Mahdi is not born for them. They believe in Imam Mahdi, but they don't believe that he's born. But we believe he's born. This hadith only makes sense when it comes to our creed. Because it doesn't make sense otherwise. Interestingly enough, Henry Corbin, the French philosopher who wrote a lot about mysticism and the 12th Imam, says the only active religion, in his knowledge, he said, the only active religion that remains on earth was the Ithna Ashariya Imamiyya. Why? Because they believed in a leader that was still alive, that was still leading them, and a portal between them and Allah. Everyone else, their leaders have passed away. So Moses isn't here anymore. The Christians believe that Jesus isn't here anymore. The Muslims who are not Ithna Ashariya Imamiyya believe that Imam Mahdi is not alive and the Prophet Muhammad passed away, so they don't have a guide anymore. We still have a guide. He's still here. We're supposed to interact with him in a way that he is here because he is here. In the time of Imam Al-Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salam, he was under house arrest because they believed in the coming of the one that was supposed to be the savior. Because this was a belief that was known. It was a prophecy that was known. And when the Imam is born, and after 5 years, when he's 5 years old, Imam Hassan Askari passes away, and the Imam goes into ghaibah, into occultation. He goes into occultation, and no one can access him except 4 main ambassadors. They are his representatives, and they were the ones who were condoned from his father and his grandfather, trusted people. They were the ones who were the link between the Imam and the Shia during the first ghaibah. The first ghaibah lasted around 70 years. When the final ambassador passed away, we entered into what is known as the major occultation, Al-Ghaiba Al-Kubra, which we're in right now, which has lasted for over 1,000 years. So there are 2 ghaibas, okay? 2 occultations. One before the 70 years, and after 70 years till now, over 1,000 years. During the minor occultation, as in the first 70 years of the Imam's life, whilst he was interacting with his followers through ambassadors to get them used to the occultation. It wasn't supposed to happen straight away because the occultation was prophesied from the beginning. And I'll mention that in a moment. The occultation was prophesied by the Imams again and again and again. But they couldn't do it occultation immediately. That 70 years was a buffer so that the Shia could get used to interacting with the Imam in that way. During that time was when our main hadith book was compiled. The book that is known as Al-Kafi, compiled by Shaykh Al-Kulayni. Shaykh Al-Kulayni, he compiled this book when? Minor occultation. This is really important. And I really want you guys to focus, if you're going to focus on anything I'm going to say today, this part of the lecture is really important for you to focus on. Okay? Shaykh Al-Kulayni. Because this book, I mention this often when I go anywhere. As Shia, we should all have this book in our homes. Okay? We have to interact with the words of our Imams from the book that is most close to them. And that is Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi, written by Shaykh Al-Kulayni, compiled by him rather, compiled by Shaykh Al-Kulayni in that time of Ghayb al-Sughra. So, when you look at the hadith in this book, you have to consider this is all compiled in that time. So you have to take yourself to that time to start to live what it is that the Imams were saying. And there's a narration in there, in Kitab al-Hujjah, a narration from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, when he's speaking to his companion Zurara, and he tells Zurara, there's going to come a time, so now we're speaking 6 generations before. Imam is 12th Imam, Imam al-Sadiq is 6th Imam, so 6 generations before, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is telling Zurara, his companion, there's going to be a ghaibah. Okay? So, this book was compiled in the ghaibah. He says, there's going to be a ghaibah. There's going to be a time when the people cannot access the Imam. And Zurara panics and says, how could that be? Everything we need, we come to you. How are the followers going to react in that time? And he says, how do I know if I'm in that time? What would I do? He panics. He wants to know what he can do if he was in a time of ghaibah. He was worried that it would be in his time. Imam al-Sadiq tells him, if you find yourself in that time when there's a lot of chaos and confusion and times when people, their hearts were tested and they did not pass the test and they all doubted in their Imam and they all started to turn their backs on their Imam and people began to believe it's just a fairy tale. He says, in that time of chaos, recite the following dua. And then he says the dua. And you guys may have heard of the dua, but this is where it comes from. He says, Allahumma arifni nafsak. Lord, allow me to know you. فَإِنَّكَ إِن لَمْ تُعَرِّفْنِي نَفْسَكَ لَمْ أَعْرِفْ نَبِيَّكَ. If you do not allow me to know you, I cannot know your prophet. Allahumma arifni rasulak. Lord, allow me to know your messenger. Notice how he went from Nabi to Rasul, because now it's about the Risala, the message. And I'll mention what this means, the significance of this. Allahumma arifni rasulak. فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. If you do not allow me to know your messenger, I will not know your hujjah. Allahumma arifni hujjatak. Lord, allow me to know your hujjah. فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. If you do not allow me to know your hujjah, I have been misguided from my religion. That the central point of my deen is to know your hujjah, because this is the way in which you want me to come to you, through this portal. Your hujjah, your proof. Hujjah is proof. This is your proof. This is something that a person yahtajja bihi. Okay, it's a proof. Hujjah is wajibu ta'a. It's incumbent upon me to devote myself and obey this person, this hujjah. If I don't know him, how can I obey him? How can I follow him if I don't know him? To obey him and to follow him comes after knowing him. The dua, Imam Sadiq says to Zurara, ask to know him. And from there you'll know your Prophet, from there you know Allah. You see, he connected them all on purpose. Lord, let me know you. If you don't allow me to know you, I won't know your Prophet. If you don't allow me to know your Prophet, I won't know your hujjah. Because it's all one. Remember when I said it doesn't make sense without it? There's something missing. There's a missing gap, a huge gap. When this silsila is not offered in this way, when this chain is not offered in this way, there's a gap, a huge gap. So I really wanted to focus on this being in Al-Kafi, being in Shaykh Al-Kulayni's compilation of hadith. Because, as well, just on a side note, we believe in imama, as in we believe that when the Prophet passes away, the line of truth and the link to the heavens is not cut off. There has to be hujjatullah on earth. So we believe that it is Imam Ali alayhi salam as the first of the Atra accompanying the Quran to continue. And after him Al-Hasan alayhi salam, and after him Al-Hussain alayhi salam. Continuing to, we get to our Imam. During each Imam's time, they had companions. When the Imam would speak, these companions would write. And this is what we call al-usul. You guys may have heard of something called usul 400. They say these are books, 400 books. Many of them were lost. Only maybe 16 of them remained at the end. And these books ultimately were the books of hadith from the companions of the Imams until they reached Al-Kulayni. And then he compiled Al-Kafi from these different sources. These sources that were written in the times of the Imams. Each Imam had companions, like for example, Zurara that I mentioned right now. So let's say Zurara had an asl, a book, and he would write down everything that the Imam would say, and that was passed down until Shaykh Al-Kulayni compiles these books, and that's what makes Al-Kafi. Okay? This is important for you to know. This is so important for you to know. If you don't know these things, there's always going to be a gap in your knowledge as Shia. So it's important for you to dig, to get to the root of your beliefs and your sources, and your primary sources, and to be able to access them. So this is where we have our main book, Al-Kafi. We have 4 main books. Okay? 4. You guys know the Sunni books, right? You don't know the Shia books though, huh? Why? Because you want to debate. Speaker's Corner. We have Al-Kafi. We have by Shaykh Al-Kulayni. We have Man La Yahdaruhu Al-Faqih by Shaykh Saduq. Shaykh Saduq. Okay, you have to know who Shaykh Saduq is. Very important. If you want to be close to Imam Al-Mahdi, these are the scholars in the time of right in or right after Al-Ghayba Al-Sughra. And we have Al-Tahdhib Wal-Istibsar for Shaykh Al-Tusi. These are our 4 main books. Right? It's important for us to know this, to know who Shaykh Al-Tusi is. He is in the 12th tier. Before him in the 10th tier was Shaykh Saduq. Shaykh Al-Mufid is 11th tier. Shaykh Al-Kulayni is 9th tier. You don't have to know those things, but you should know who they are. You should know the books that tell us about Imam Al-Mahdi. You know what I'm telling you today? Where is all this information from? It's from those books. Okay, so we need to know. You know what's interesting though? If you don't believe in this imama, as in the Ma'soom is alive, right? The Ma'soom is alive. That's why we didn't need hadith books. Do you see how the hadith was compiled in the Ghayba? So before the Ghayba, there were no hadith books that were compiled because we didn't need it. Because we believed that the source of the religion was already alive. Do you understand? Some will say, how come the Shia was so late? How come the Shia was so late for their hadith compilations? We say we didn't need them. We compiled them when we needed them. Shaykh al-Quraini did this in the ghaibah. But before that, our Imam was alive. When we say Imam's alive, for us, that is like Rasulullah being alive. The Ma'soom is alive. So what the Imam says, he's telling me from the knowledge of Rasulullah. And this is when you find the difference between us and other denominations of Islam, because after the Prophet passes away, hadith is banned from being written. You cannot write down hadith. Okay? The first, second Khalifa, they ban it. Not allowed. For at least 100 years. So we're talking about generations and generations. And then, after 100 and something years, hadith books are compiled or offered. Where is it from? Because it wasn't written. So they say it was through memorization of several people over generations. From the time of the Prophet. Let's say I'm a Sahaba in time of the Prophet. I learned the hadith from him. I memorized it. I gave it to someone. He memorized it. He gave it to someone. He memorized it. He gave it to someone. Memorized it. Generations, over 100 something years, until it reached someone who was allowed to write it down. It was memorized. Do you understand? It's a question mark. Whereas for the Shia, it wasn't memorized. The Imam was alive. So the same question does not fall upon us. Because for us, we didn't suffer the link being cut when the Prophet died. The link to the heavens continues. So we didn't need that. And the companions would write until it reached the compilation in Al-Kafi. Okay? This is important for you to know. Because you're supposed to have confidence. Just because you're not the majority doesn't mean you're not orthodox. You're very orthodox. You're supposed to have confidence in your beliefs. You're not just on the side and you believe in some weird beliefs like 1,000-year-old Imam, whereas we all as Muslims believe in Nuh being over 900 years old in the Quran, and no one says anything about that. And that's fine. But suddenly this is strange. Well, if we have the sources that point to it, and we have the textual and logical evidence that points to it, there's no problem in it. I'm supposed to have confidence in my beliefs. As long as I know methodologically how to get there. What I really want to do today is methodology. So I started with ayah, Qur'aniyya, then I mentioned textual evidence, now I'm mentioning some logical evidence. Okay? So you have a methodology by which you come to your beliefs. A scholar named Al-Nu'mani, he was a student of Shaykh Al-Kulayni. He has a book called Kitab Al-Ghaybah. It's the first book called Kitab Al-Ghaybah on the Imam. And in it, he mentions the hadith in which the Imams tell us that there are going to be 2 occultations, 2 ghaybahs, 2 occultations. And they mention this again and again. There are 10 different chains of narration for this hadith. So it's coming from several different places and different people when they were narrating this. So the Imam said this in front of different people constantly. The Imam is before Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And it reached us through 10 different sources. So 2 ghaybahs was always predetermined, predestined. It was something that was prophesied from beforehand. And Al-Nu'mani says, if the Imam was not to go into ghaybah, it would prove the falsehood of our religion. It wouldn't prove it to be true, it would prove it to be false. That there had to be an occultation because it was so often prophesied. So some people, they say that the occultation is something that proves that tashayyu' is wrong. proves that the Imamiyya are wrong. Nu'mani says, no, it doesn't. Occultation proves that we're right. Because it was prophesied again and again and again. The reason why I said 10 different sources is to show you how often the Imams, generations before the ghaibah, would speak about the ghaibah happening. I mean, what kind of coincidence is that, if it was a coincidence? That generations before, they all knew that there was going to be an occultation. And that was written beforehand. So when it happened, it just proved them right. That this was supposed to happen. This was something that we were preparing for a long time. The Imam is on earth right now. He is a man. He eats. He sleeps. He gets sick. He has feelings. He thinks. He's a human being. He has a long life, but he's a human being. And the Imam is at work. The Imam is working. The Imam has a whole network, a shadow network. He doesn't have a government on earth that people know of, but he has people that work for him, and sometimes, most of the time, they don't know that they're working for him. But they could be working for someone who's working for someone who's working for someone who's working for someone who's working directly under him. Because we have hadith about those known as Al-Abdal. Okay? They are people who are substituted, Al-Abdal, every generation. And they are the ones that know the Imam and interact with him directly. That he has people around him. Other hadiths say he always has 30 in every generation. 30. This is different than the 313. I'm talking about people right now that interact with him. The greatest people on earth they'd be that interact with him. And they are substituted in every generation, that when they pass away, they are Abdal, others come. They are the elite of the elite. You guys can think of who such people are. No one can really know, but I have some ideas. And you can see, subhanAllah, the world was never the same after January 2nd a few years ago. They could have been from the Abdal. The Imam is constantly receiving news from east to west, from Russia, from Brazil, from China, from every corner of the earth. And he has people working for him from all these different corners. And as believers who live in the West, who live in London, when we are involved in Amal Islami, when we are involved in any sort of work for Islam, for the people, we might not have direct access to the Imam, but do not doubt for a second, especially when your soul stands in solidarity with the oppressed of the world, especially when your intention is to gain closeness and proximity to the Imam. Don't doubt for a second that you're working in this network. And that's how you're supposed to start to interact with the idea of the Imam in your life. You're supposed to start to interact with this idea like it's not just an idea anymore. Like, no, this is someone who is guided by Allah, the human form of the Quran, basically, the human form of the Quran, that will never separate from the Quran. And just like I read the Quran every day, I need to speak to my Imam every day. I need to form this relationship with my Imam so that I can gain proximity to him, gain proximity to Allah, gain proximity to the Prophet through his hujjah. That's the way Allah wants it. And that's why Dua al-Ahd is the place that you should begin with. Dua al-Ahd. Okay? The prayer, the dua of the covenant with the Imam. And subhanAllah, when you look at the narrations that speak about this dua and other narrations, like a very rare narration from Imam Al-Mahdi himself, because they're rare, he says, the one who worships and devotes himself to Allah for 40 mornings, then the wisdom from his heart will erupt onto his tongue. Okay? 40 mornings. Likewise, Dua al-Ahd Imam Sadiq alayhi salam recommends us to read it for 40 mornings in a row, this dua. That is a covenant between you and Imam Al-Mahdi. In this dua, one praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you send your salutations to the Imam and you make a promise. You say, Ya Allah, in hala bayni wa baynahu al-mawt, الذي جعلته على عبادك حتما مقضيا. If death was to come between him and I wasn't going to be there when he returns, that I died before he came back, then I want you to raise me from my grave with my sword in my hand and make me ready, even if I was in my shroud, to respond to the call of the caller when he calls me. ملبيا دعوة الداعي إذا دعاني. If he calls me, I'm ready. Even in my grave, I'm going to get up. That's a warrior dua. 40 mornings in a row, you're supposed to read that. And if you do, then you will be of those that will be raised with the Imam at the end of times. Even if you're dead, you'll be raised. That's the prophecy. And there's a line in this dua where he says, Allahumma أرني الطلعة الرشيدة والغرة الحميدة. Lord, show me the curls of his hair. That's in the dua. Why would that be in the dua? Because you're supposed to have affection for the Imam. That's poetic. Okay? So there's a warrior element to the dua, but there's also affection. I'm supposed to have affection towards my Imam. I'm supposed to develop atifa, love towards my Imam. That he takes me by the hand and he takes me to Allah. That he's there guarding me. That God has sent him to me to teach me. And if I don't develop this relationship with him, I'm not going to bear fruit of how much this religion has to offer me. It's a very spiritual tradition. And it's orthodox. And the textual evidence supports it. And the logical evidence supports it. The Quran supports it. And subhanAllah, on a personal note, when I was 19, 20 years old, subhanAllah, Brother Hussain Rajab Ali, a legend in the speaking world, he had a lecture this year that I saw when he said, because he became very sick, and then subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept him safe for us, and inshallah may Allah prolong his life. He said that it's possible to go back in time when you speak to a youth and you see yourself and you give advice to that person. And sometimes, like right now, the state I'm in right now, I can see it in some of you right now. I'm seeing myself in you. I used to come to this mosque when I was 19 and I would sit here, and I'm telling Hussain at 19 right now, okay? When I came, I remember I was told about Dua al-Ahd at that age. And it was right at the beginning, and I couldn't speak Arabic and I couldn't read Arabic. And I had no plans to be a scholar or anything, or to Hawza. But it started with that dua. That dua started everything. And Hassan, you told me that dua. Habibi. I owe you that one. It started there. 40 mornings in a row. To wake up in the morning, commit to Allah and read that dua. Even if you can't read Arabic, even if you have no other basis, you have belief in your heart and you have an intention, that's enough. And subhanAllah, looking back at the last 11 years, I see it as a miracle, but everything that was promised happened. Everything that was promised happened, and it continues to happen, and it will continue to happen. So, if there's going to be a takeaway from today, as we move on to the next few nights, because tomorrow I'm going to go more into the ghaibah and then the prophecy for the end of times, inshallah, it's to seek proximity to the Imam. That he is alive, he is on earth, he is here, and he is waiting for you. He's the one waiting for you, he's waiting for us. And if I'm going to bear fruit from my relationship with Islam, then it's only going to happen through this link. Allahumma arifni nafsak, فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف نبيك. اللهم عرفني رسولك فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. One of the main reasons that are given for the eschatological return of the Imam is retribution for Karbala. In Dua al-Nudbah we read أين الطالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء. Where is the one that is going to call for retribution for the blood that was spilled from the one that was slaughtered in Karbala? That the tragedy of Imam Al-Hussain alayhi salam is so great a saint was he, so great a beloved of Allah was he, that this will never be forgiven, and retribution must be sought, that the whole world will see this retribution when the Imam returns. For what Abu Abdullah alayhi salam had to bear on Ashura when he gave away his most beloved again and again and again, especially his eldest son, the one who most resembled Rasulullah, Ali al-Akbar. And when Ali al-Akbar went out into the battlefield without any water, the dry, thirsty throat, and when his horse was blinded by his blood and ran into the enemy camps, and the enemy threw down their swords and spears on the oldest son of Imam Al-Hussain, and he lay on the ground mutilated, as Abu Abdullah approached his son Ali and sat down by his body and embraced him and put his cheek on the cheek of Ali, covered in blood. He looks into the eyes of his son, and as Ali al-Akbar, as his soul is about to leave this world, tears stroll down his eyes, but at the same time he's smiling. Abu Abdullah asks him, "My son, why are you smiling?" And he says, "Because I see my grandfather Rasulullah. He's come to me with a cup of water, and he says, I will never go thirsty after this. And my son, why are you crying?" He says, "Father, I'm crying because I can see my grandmother. I can see my grandmother, Fatima. She keeps crying and calling your name. Wa walada, wa Hussaina, wa Atshana, ya Zahra."